Hi. Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
We've got a few students here.
Just a few, not all of them yet.
I'm good that we've got that link set up. I'm going to just leave you for a minute.
Okay. Take your time.
Back in 5 minutes or so, yeah?
All righty. Okay. I think it's most of the people from last week, so I'll skip your introduction.
Okay.
Let me allow you to share your screen. Yeah, it's ready.
Okay, so I should start?
Yes, you can start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. And
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
Could everybody show your face? Just to, check your existence. Show me your face.
There's also some friends from London are here, I think.
Oh.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is the second lecture that I'm giving you, as you know, and I guess there's going to be another, about 4 more after this, is it?
Yes, there are 4 more.
Yeah. Okay. But this is the second one in the series, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The last one I did, you remember, was about the work of Alvaro Siza, and it was a lot about the topography, what I called the topography, which is the ground, but also it's the site, and it's not only the site that has a lot of different kinds of steps and levels and slopes and things. It's like a normal topography that has, you'd think, but it's also the conditions of the site that might even just be the geometry of the site on a flat site, yeah, or it might even be you could even think of it the topography of an interior of a building or of a room. I was thinking about it a little bit in a slightly more broader sense than a kind of slopes and mountains and things. Now today I'm going to, let me share my screen. All right, let me. Okay, and so can you see that, everyone? Yeah? Oh,
I
no,
don't
just a minute.
think the screens are shared yet.
Okay, so let's see now. I've got, whoops, let's see. To share screen, share. Okay. Can you see that now? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I slightly changed the title because it was anticipating change, and I was going to continue to speak about that theme of topography. But I thought that since you people are doing this urban furniture project, and it's you're not, I was thinking that I was going to show you a project which Winston mentioned, which is the remaking of an interior, and it's like a city inside a building. I'll explain that later. So this time I'm going to talk about change, as I was going to, but it's designing the city with an awareness of time. So, or designing with an awareness of time and at any scale, but we're always thinking about the city. And how change and time is relevant to architecture, I think, in any project that one does. And you will remember yesterday that I mentioned that all of this work that I'm showing you was done together with the architect Florian Bagel, who I was teaching with and working with for many, many years. And he sadly died about 2 years ago. So I want to acknowledge that practically all the ideas are coming from him. He was a master. And you remember I showed you several pictures by the French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson at the beginning of the last lecture. In this one, which I think I showed you last time as well, we see a place, a vernacular place, a village. It's in Yugoslavia. It was taken in the mid-1960s, but I'm sure that place is probably might be very similar today, not unlike what it shows here. And it has a beauty. I think it has a beauty due to its informality and ease in the way that the street responds to the natural topography. It is just not pretending to be anything other than what it is. And the big question, similarly, I could show you a Korean village that's a traditional Korean village, or even a traditional Korean house, a hanok, and they tend to have this kind of relaxed and gentle relationship to the site where they are. That's responsive to the conditions of the hill where they're standing, or the way that the sun comes into the street. That has all been somehow considered naturally. And the big question is, can we design places like that today? Places that have this kind of character and charm. So I want to discuss with you ways of thinking and ways of seeing that can help us as architects and designers to build places as varied and rich as this in the modern time. So I will speak about change and uncertainty. And I think one needs to take a positive attitude towards both of these things. They're not bad things, change or uncertain future. One needs to build into the project an expectation of change, change of its form and of use. And to understand that these changes in the future can be a good thing. They can make the place better and better. This is a sketch of Florian's. I think I might have shown you as well. And it's not about change, but it's relationship of elements and spaces between them. In this case, elements that are sitting on a table, but it doesn't matter. It could be a landscape, and it's open-ended. This composition. It could be rearranged. Now, sometimes we've called this this idea about change. We've used a word which was probably invented by John Ruskin, the English writer from the 19th century. He called it changefulness. So very often, Florian and I have lectured about that, and we think that an architecture of changefulness has variety with a certain unpredictability and charm. The English architect called Cedric Price, you might know it, or you might not know. He talked about time a lot, and he would call this anticipatory architecture, an architecture that anticipates futures that one can't necessarily know. It does not have a final and fixed form. Its form allows for change in time. It is usually irregular, asymmetric, sometimes seemingly disorderly or chaotic. Like this picture, it's a bit like not very orderly, this elevation of this church, but it is not a mess, I don't think. It has a kind of balance in its asymmetry. It is generous and assumes a certain amount of redundancy. You know, some parts of it are not necessarily as efficient as they need to be. Utility and efficiency are not the most important generators of its form. It is easy to add or take away parts from it because it is not a self-sufficient unified whole standing alone. It does not start from a blank page. Rather, it is responsive and adaptive to essential characteristics of the place, to the down-to-earth social realities, such as which side of the street the sun is shining on. It relies on next tos and interrelationships between parts. So the things that are next to it, and it's about the interrelationships of the elements or its parts, such as, for example, the relationship between this wide pier and these two that are similar, and then this one which is not quite the same as this one. That is a kind of symmetrical whole that maybe there was another gable like this over here before. Perhaps there was, and it was a kind of symmetrical elevation and something happened to this roof, like it burned down or something. However, but this is not exactly the same as this one. Maybe it has been adapted a bit. It's also different down here. So who knows? And then there's the towers on the side, yeah, which is probably at the other end of the building. And there's this differences on different sides are responding to different things that are happening on the ground. So who knows the reasons why this has this form, but it's responding and probably has been changed in time quite a number of times. That kind of or let me go back on this. A few years ago, some teaching colleagues at the CAS in London, where we were teaching, asked their students, what is the nature of the Gothic? This is probably a Gothic building in France that you're looking at. And we were reminded of John Ruskin's essay about this. In his book called The Stones of Venice, Ruskin writes, quotes, "It is one of the chief virtues of the Gothic builders that they never suffered ideas of outside symmetries and consistencies to interfere with the real use and value of what they did. If they wanted a window, they opened one. A room, they added one. A buttress, they built one, utterly regardless of any established conventionalities of external appearance, knowing, as indeed always happened, that such daring interruptions of the formal plan would rather give additional interest to its symmetry rather than injure it." I don't know if I read that too quickly, but so he's saying that, you know, in the medieval times in Europe, and one could argue that this is very relevant to the Korean culture. I would argue. There's an understanding that there's a kind of classical Roman or Greek symmetrical, holistic kind of idea of the building, but such as I was just mentioning, these three windows, these piers that are, it's symmetric. If there was another gable like this here, it would be rather symmetric and classical, when they needed something, they would do it, but they would do it knowingly, and they would readdress the balance and make it better. It would give additional interest to its symmetry rather than injuring it. So Ruskin used the word changefulness to describe these sorts of qualities that come about when you bring very different things into close proximity. Like in a collage, this is a collage by Pablo Picasso in 1913. In a collage, there is no beginning and no end. One enters the process at any stage. As a result, there's an open-endedness and a partially formed unity of elements. So the architecture of changeableness that we're trying to describe has many of the qualities that one normally would use to describe natural phenomena, such as a geological rock formation or the form of living plants. And vernacular and medieval buildings often have these qualities, usually because they've been built and rebuilt over a long period of time, adjusting themselves to conditions and responding to the simple needs of people. They have a sense of ease and integrity about them. Changefulness speaks about the dimension of time and collective memory in architecture. When we worked in the coal mining region near Leipzig in Eastern Germany in the late 1990s, where there are these large open cast coal mining holes in the landscape, we realized that these mining operations had exposed layers of earth that were over 50 million years old. This made us realize that every site that one works with has many times embedded in it. Many of them are invisible, but still present in some way. So in this picture, we're looking down at the bottom of the mine, and these are the railway tracks for the big machine that is excavating the earth. It is important to understand that every place is in a process of change over time and is never in a final and fixed state. Okay, now I'm going to show you a rather extreme example of what this might mean. So the American artist, land artist, Robert Smithson, was giving a slide lecture at the School of Architecture at the University of Utah in 1972. The audience assumed he would speak about the ancient Mayan pyramid at Palenque in Mexico. Rather than this, he spent the whole time speaking about this hotel where he stayed when visiting the ancient site. He explained the qualities of changefulness like this, quotes, "At one point, evidently they decided to build some floors and decided that that wasn't a very good idea. So they demolished them and they left this kind of spiky, irregular cantilevered effect coming off the side of the wall. It sort of suggests Piranesi. I don't know if you know who that is, but that an Italian architect who made many drawings and etchings of ruins in Italy. You can see that instead of just tearing it all down at once, they tear it down partially, so you're not deprived of the complete wreckage situation, he calls it. It's not often that you see buildings being both ripped down and built up at the same time. You never know when you'll have some traveler, some tourist, who comes to the hotel and wants a place that doesn't have a roof on it. I mean, you can imagine him what he's trying to explain is a kind of what he called entropy, or a process of change, a natural process of change, which he thought in his artworks and he was trying to engage in and let happen. The logic of the whole place is just impossible to fathom. There's no way that you could possibly figure it out. Okay, so that's Smithson sort of explaining what he thought was, it's a kind of derelict kind of building that they're sort of partially using, a kind of special quality that one could engage with and perhaps in this way, by understanding this process of change being good, could utilize this in an architectural project and in the way that the city is being built. I'm going to show you another example of a contemporary project that I think has this kind of quality as well. The Atelier Haus Weissache near Bern in Switzerland, designed by the Swiss architect Peter Markley, could be seen as a good recent architectural example of what I'm calling changefulness. The materialization of the Atelier House, both exterior and interior, is a loose montage of a number of normal building materials. Fair-faced in situ cast concrete, like here, and here painted. Painted white in some places, as I showed you. Terracotta blocks normally used for the internal partition walls, like here. Painted white above a datum of approximately 1 meter from the floor and unpainted below. A sloping ceiling made with cross-laminated timber, painted white up here. A cement screed floor and exposed black foam glass insulation panels in some places that have been kind of lacquered on their surface. It feels like the house could easily be altered tomorrow without any loss of character. There's a loose and relaxed construction that looks effortless. On closer inspection, it is extremely thoughtful and precise. One has the impression that this house is either still under construction or is partially in the process of demolition, something like the Robert Smithson example I showed you. On the exterior, several wall segments are constructed in fair-faced in situ cast concrete in the form that appears like rectangular stone blocks, these here, stacked on top of each other, with irregular sides that one looks like they're meant to be keyed into maybe a brick wall in the future. There you can see this pier like that here. One can imagine this house as a stunningly beautiful ruin in 100 or 200 years, with these concrete piers standing alone, weathered and covered in moss and lichen, surrounded with lush vegetation. The house has a prehistoric feeling about it, and at the same time is very much part of the present. From a distance, if I go back to this picture, but especially when you stand even further back from the house as you approach it, the timber framed windows between these concrete piers look like temporary formwork, unpainted and provisional. On the inside, these wall segments have a layer of insulation and a layer of basic and inexpensive terracotta building blocks. Where they are painted, the rough mortar joints have intentionally been left unpainted, giving the effect of a delicate tracing of rough pencil lines on the wall surface. This is a wonderfully sophisticated roughness. Okay, so those are just two kind of examples to give you an impression. Now I'm going to show you a project which that we designed about 8 years ago, and it was built about 7 years ago, and it was for the school where we were teaching at the London Metropolitan University. And we didn't know that the kind of change that has happened was going to happen. So we didn't really design it with the expectation of change. However, the attitudes that I'm just speaking about were inherently in our minds. The question that I asked at the beginning, can we make an architecture that has that kind of charm and quality that a vernacular village has, or a vernacular house, was in our minds. So in one way or the other, I guess we were thinking about what we call changefulness, even though we expected that things were not going to change very much. In this project, we were working with the idea of city. We were thinking of the project as a little city inside the building. So the building is this one here, that we were the site. And this is East London, just east of the financial district in London. And this is the Whitechapel Art Gallery here. And this road goes east and west, and we're looking east out of this, as we're coming out of the city. It was an ancient Roman gate near here, and this is the old Roman road that went to the east coast of England from London. So it's a very old road. And we were given this building to bring the architecture school together with the art school of the university, and to renovate the interior of this building, which used to be a factory, I think a carpet factory and warehouse. When we first started the project, well, this is then a montage of what we actually did very early on, thinking about that we're going to need some rooms like a lecture hall and so on that need a higher ceiling height than was available in the building. And so we were thinking of putting a little village on the roof of buildings. And we were thinking of, in this montage, of the relationship between the Whitechapel Art Gallery here and this building at the corner, and this kind of temple at the top here that looks down into this public space, and this corner of the building which we were going to change into a gallery space for the art school. So when we started working, we made a proposal for this little village on the roof at the beginning. We built a little timber model and made sketches of here's the relationship I just spoke about, the gallery and these three elements speaking to each other across the street. And here's the kind of another version of this village of buildings up on the roof. We made this timber model and showed it to the dean and vice chancellor of the university. And it was very important. It gave them courage and a sense of vision that the existing building had the potential to become more part of the city in Whitechapel, in this part of London. And they were eager about this, and they were thinking, well, it wouldn't be built now, but it could be built in a later phase if it was became possible. However, we brought this sense of urbanity into the interior floors of the building. The idea of city and connecting back to the city is at the heart of the design. The existing building has a lot of character. There are a number of memorable features in the building that we identified and have tried to keep and reveal in the design. In one corner of the building, there are these mushrooms. There are 3 of these mushroom columns like this. This is how the building looked when we came. The art students were using it with little partition walls everywhere, and a kind of mess of, like a shanty town of just trying to inhabit the place with making little studio spaces. Not very efficient at all. And this concrete structure, when we, and there's a construction photograph where a demolition photograph, the concrete structure is robust and has a beauty of its own. The building was built in the early 1960s as a textile factory and warehouse. After these internal partition walls were removed and the building was taken back to its structural shell, the space on each floor seemed vast. When introducing new structures into the building, we tried to give good conversations between new and old. We've identified what we called some time witnesses, what Florian calls time witnesses, that have been retained and given special presence within the design. Sometimes we've given the new a bit of friendly awkwardness. This means that some things are not quite as you might expect them, and that's what we like about it. So for example, you'll see maybe in the pictures I show you later that this gate here, which had a 3-hour fire, you can see these two screens would come down to protect one part of the building from the other from a fire. We retained these and a number of these and things, elements like this, just as they are, and they become not only a memory of the past, but they're inherent to the character of the place. So we think that maybe this could be called a takeaway architecture. That is to say, taking away rather than always adding things. The example here is the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, designed by the architects Lacaton and Vassal in 2001, demonstrates a radical vision for a contemporary museum that anticipates change constantly. The architects stripped the building right back to its raw shell and made subtle judgments about how little needs to be built. For example, these columns here are new, and this wall back here is new, but everything else is existing. And they've taken away the false ceiling, which was probably right down to that level formerly. Here's another example in Seoul, where architect Jo Sung-yong has brought a fine piece of modern architecture from the early 1970s back to its bare bones by removing large areas of the facade and floors. This partial demolition has revealed the inherent spatial qualities of the building that the original architect intended. Mr. Jo used the budget that would have been used to completely demolish the building to partially open the structure to the outside to be used as part of the children's garden. And to build several new interiors within this that could be usable. Okay, this is a typical plan, floor plan of the building as we found it. There was a warren of narrow, dark corridors. For example, there's a corridor here, it ends in a kind of dead end, and turn it here and ends in a dead end. And it was like a maze. Fire doors and exit signs were everywhere. Like this, it looked like this. You get lost and find yourself at the dead end without any sense of orientation. The main staircase and lifts are in the center here on the east side of the building. And then you go immediately into these corridors. We went through many discussions amongst our colleagues in the architecture research unit where we were working, and with our fellow faculty members when designing the new layout and studio spaces that we were doing in the building. We didn't want to leave the floor completely open plan, so-called flexible space, allowing an unobstructed or unstructured shanty town of inhabitation to grow each year like the way that the building was being used already. The floor space of the building was being used very inefficiently and wasteful in the previous time. The task was to provide a number of types of studio spaces for art students, painters, sculptors, people doing film or installation works, as well as design, furniture, jewelry, graphics, etc. The studios should be able to be adapted and reused by people working in various disciplines within the faculty. We agreed, so in that way, there was an expectation of change, that things could be reused and for different kinds of types of studios. We agreed with this and tried to make a good variety of types of studio rooms on each floor. After drawing many plan layout options, this drawing was an important step in the design process. In this initial plan concept sketch that Florian made, only the north end of the building is shown. So this is the whole plan here. He's tracing over a plan that we were just looking at, and he's drawing the north end, and that south end here might be something similar, indicating a series of strips of rooms. So like here is a kind of type of room, and then here's another one which is like with three-sided walls. And then here's another kind of strip of space which is like some kind of tables and furniture that's somehow partially enclosing, less enclosing than any of these. And then this here's like large table, an open room. So it's varying in openness, I suppose, as you go to the left. We thought of this like comb-like structures of different sizes arranged next to each other. That's maybe something similar to this composition by Paul Klee in the current of 6 weirs. So he's thinking of currents of, I guess, water and dams or weirs that are changing the current and it's getting slower and slower, or it's getting faster and faster, I don't know, as from one side to the other. Okay, so after a lot of design thinking, drawing and testing in models, the concept of parallel bands of varying sizes of rooms was finally resolved in this plan. This is a typical plan. This is the plan of the 4th floor, which was used for the architecture diploma course. The extensive floor plate has been liberated by the primary architectural move to relocate the existing toilet block, which was in front of the stairs here. It was right here. This is an open light well. These are external fire stairs that are only used in fire. Okay, and we took these toilets from here and rebuilt them over here. And this liberated the plan and opened up the possibility of having what we call the boulevard, which is like a street-like space going the full length of the building. This is given the possibility of making an urban space within the building, or something that has a quality like an urban space within the building. A sense of city and exteriority. So that's, we call that the boulevard. It's something like this. This is an archaeologist's plan of the forum, the Roman Forum in Pompeii, an ancient Roman city of Pompeii, where the public buildings are arranged rather irregularly around this long square, colonnaded square that has a temple at one end and tombs and things at the other, but not in the center. They're sort of around the edges, these monuments and buildings. And as you can see, the buildings each have a different character and size and form. When entering the 4th floor that I just showed the plan of, from the main staircase, one now arrives in the boulevard, a large shared space that connects the tapestry of studio spaces on the floor and immediately gives one a sense of orientation. The boulevard is the heart of the little city in the building. All doors and passages lead to the boulevard. And it can be used in many, many different ways. It's not a corridor. It's wider and more generous than a corridor, but it's not really a room either. It's a kind of in-between space, like a street where everybody meets. I'll come back to the building of it. So we thought of this like, this is the plan of I've taken the plan apart now here, and here's the boulevard and the rooms that surround it. These here, what we call the room studios on the east side, they're rooms with enclosed rooms. Then there's the boulevard, and then there are these series of rooms inside the internal side of the plan, which is the meeting rooms and the toilets at the one end. And here we have the open hall studios, the hall studios. So you could say 3 geographies, 1, 2, and 3. I'm just going to go through them one by one now. The room studios are a series of rooms, each with a large door and window facing the boulevard, like this. Like a row of small houses on the street. Room studios have a view to the city over East London. So they're on the east side, and we can, out of these kind of windows. Here's a door, a big timber door that was existing for the warehouse that we've retained. And they, of course, in the architecture school, they get completely clogged up with models and things, but they were each used in a separate way by the different studios, of course. And of course, also out in the boulevard, people were using them extensively, especially by the end of the year. Then the second geography was these, in the middle of the plan were these, what we called meeting rooms. And they're facing the boulevard on the other side. There are 3 meeting rooms and the existing light well in the center of the floor plate. This is the largest one, and it was used for crits and things. And it has this large sliding door that opened to the wider part of the boulevard. So one could have a lecture within this meeting room and in the boulevard. And between the meeting rooms, there are passages that connect the boulevard to the third geography, the open hall studios. So something like a little passage like one would get in a village, like that. And here it looks like this. We're looking back towards the boulevard through the passage. And back towards the boulevard, and the light well is here, existing light well. And this gateway that of the fire gate was, as I mentioned before, as you can see it. And we come to the open hall studios, which have wonderful views westward to the City of London and northward to the Whitechapel High Street, and to the a beautiful church designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor to the north. And so they have just these screened walls between them that separate one studio from another, but they're open, and this can be rearranged. These screens could be moved if needed. You can see that always this new plywood partitions and screens are always disengaged from the structure. So we didn't put these screens from column to column and embed the column in the wall. The existing concrete structure of the building is independent, is left to be independent from the new structure. You can see that here again. The open hall studios were actually the more, people liked them better. Well, they studios would be moving each year from one space to another, so that they didn't kind of colonize one space. And in general, I think people like the open hall studios better. And then we had the idea, this is an early collage of thinking about the design before any of that. And we had the idea that there should be some internal staircases, so you don't have to use the main staircase all the time. And we called these domestic stairs. As the entire building is intended to be the home of the new joint Faculty of Art, Architecture and Design, 4 new open staircases have been introduced to connect studios on all the floors, from the 1st to the 5th floor of the building, like internal staircases in a house. The idea is to promote informal contacts and dialogue between students and staff of various courses by giving the possibility of easy vertical connection from floor to floor without the necessity of using the main staircase and lifts. So we had to argue with a lot of care and difficulty that these didn't become stairs that were enclosed for fire regulations with doors and partitions up to the ceiling, so that they're open staircases from floor to floor. And then they could be really making this connection that we wanted them to make, an easy connection between different departments and different studios. And so they were very expensive to do, to cut hole in the slab and build these, but it was worth. I think it's very important because it liberated the building vertically. You can see this in this drawing, that they're arranged so that you could take a walk through the studios and a kind of journey through the building through these internal staircases, and they're arranged irregularly from one floor to the next, and they only go from one floor to another. They don't, and then you have to move across and to get to the next one. They're expected to make unexpected connections and promote informal friendships between students in a continuous promenade through the studio spaces of the entire building. Okay, now I'm going to speak a little bit about the construction of, how did we design these plywood walls and why did we do it like that? We call them plywood fin walls. We thought that they should have a tectonic integrity, like a series of small buildings, rather than being office partitions that one would normally get, probably made out of plasterboard. This image of storage of the sculptures of the Swiss sculptor Hans Josefsson in Zurich was inspirational for us. We thought perhaps the wall could have a depth like this and could be used for storage, or could be used, maybe there could be cabinets in it, or people could put their coats or their models in it. And this is another inspiration. It's an exhibition display by the architect De Wildervinck Italieu in Belgium, and we thought the wall could have a kind of depth like this. And then it became a question of the rhythm and how the openings in this wall could be composed so that there was how the regularity and irregularity of this rhythm could be orchestrated. So these are the large opening towards the staircase, and how how this could be done. And this is a section, a sketch section of this wall. The concrete slab is here and here, and it's quite high ceiling height. I think it was like 3.4 meters or something, quite high, which is very nice. And so it means that the wall can be nice and tall, higher than a sheet of plywood, a regular sheet of plywood. It had to be special sheets that would go as far as this. But we thought that the wall should have a foot and a head. Not as that we're trying to make it as a figure, but as that it has a, it stands like a building inside the space of the other building. And there was a need to have a moving joint here, because the concrete slab, the engineers told us that is moving up and down by as much as 25 millimeters, like a one, which is from the weight of people and other things up and down. So it had to actually be a movement joint here like that, so it doesn't get crushed. And so this also was a reason for this kind of connection, but we thought that it would then be, it gives it a kind of cornice, let's say, or a shoulder here at the top, and at the bottom a base to the floor, like this. So this is this head up here and this base. And then we, as I described, each of the room studios have a large door, a large window, and a small ventilation door above the door. And the standard vision panel, piece of window in the door that is required for fire regulations, is typically a small vertical slot in the door. We have made this into a low-level window. So we took the height, the standard height of that it would be, and widened it, but didn't put it quite in the center of the door, put it on the side so there's a place for the handle. We made this into a low-level window in the door. The door and the large window next to it are like two architectural figures standing on the floor. The windows are set near to the floor, are particularly good for people who are sitting down working inside the room. Above the door, there's a little wooden hatch here, as I mentioned, like the head of the figure. The door is larger than a normal door, wider and higher. You can see that both the size of the door and window are not dimensioned according to the regular rhythm of the fins. So, for example, this window is slightly wider than 2 bays. And the door is also wider than 2 bays. And so there is a leftover dimension here within the 3 bays. And similarly here, this is a wider bay than a normal one. This leftover dimensions, we think, add a kind of disturbance to the regular rhythm of the fins, and as a result, a tension which is gives character. This is a sketch of this kind of arrangement of this. In a way, this door, window, and little flap is a kind of microcosm of the whole project. The kind of the architecture of the whole project is somehow embedded in this little facade of the little house on the street. And one is reminded of the elegance of these Christian churches from 11th century in the south of France. They call them Romanesque because they were a kind of bringing of a Italian culture, architectural culture to the Northern Europe in those days, and I guess religion they were bringing with it. And they brought a very elegant, I think, and sophisticated sculptural and architectural tradition and craftsmanship into this into these buildings that have a very good sense of proportion, and but they're very simple. So this is a sketch of the boulevard as we imagined it, with this kind of storage in the wall potential, and the use of the boulevard as a kind of indeterminate space, not necessarily for any particular function, but for lots of functions. These are sketches of the corner of these thin walls, how to do the corner. Should it be an open corner like this, like maybe Mies would do, or a partially open one here like this, or in the end we made a one like this where the regular rhythm comes across and then starts again. So it's like a lap joint, like it's not trying to be symmetric at the corner. That's what we decided on. This one, the regular rhythm, and the last one is the depth of the of the fin. And then we put in some of the fins, they're much deeper, facing the open hall studios, and we put these cabinets, but not everywhere. We put them with the different sort of types of doors, and so that they become like little buildings as well, little building elevations that have their own presence. And the boulevard is, as I showed you before, is sometimes used for lectures or events, and it's a bit too small for a lecture theater, but that was its quality. Like it was very sense of liveliness as a result. Here you can see that mushroom column that I mentioned at the beginning, and in this part of the boulevard we gave it a special place. So we intentionally turned the wall of the boulevard around it and kind of gave it an honor or a dignity. There's another one inside the room next to it here. I don't know if I have a picture of that. No, and it is that. Well, there's one that stands right in the middle of the room, and another one stands by the side of it. So they each are given kind of a special place. And you can see here also that the original concrete structure of the column and the ceiling slab and the other square columns are painted with one color. This was a kind of a bone white or a kind of an off-white. And so that element of the concrete is given a special quality, and then the plywood walls has plywood quality and plywood, color, and the floor is in the boulevard is like a dark gray, like an asphalt, and it has you can see here stripes, painted lines on it that like the pavement in the street, like a street marking. And the lights inside the boulevard are arranged on these tracks so that they're irregularly spaced and many, so that it's very bright, like a kind of like a daylight sky. And the lights inside the rooms are not this kind of lights; they're different. So that's differentiating the space of the boulevard from the rooms, and the floor painting inside the rooms. I don't think I can show you that easily, but is a different color, so that the floor and the ceiling and the different architectural elements are each playing their role in defining the different spaces and giving them each space a different quality. And as a result, I think that this boulevard space begins to have that kind of natural quality like I was describing in the vernacular village. It's not, the width of it is varying, and this end of it here is this sort of larger end is not the same as the other end. So as you walk down this street, you're walking through a city that has varying generous or more constricted spaces. So then what happened was the university decided only after a few years of us using this building that they were going to sell it, sadly. And we were all very, very disappointed because we were enjoying this very much, and it was working very well because for the first time, the different studios that were led by the different professors normally were very segregated and very kind of almost competitive with each other and the students within them. And this, the quality of this shared exterior-like boulevard space engendered another kind of spirit where people were sharing their teaching and their work. Students were much more communicating much more with students from other studios than the ones that they were studying in, and there was more of a collegial and communicative atmosphere, and people really, really enjoyed that. I think you could see the fact that you could see through these large windows into the studio rooms, but you know, they were low and you had to sort of stoop your head down to look in. So there was, it was something like you could see what's going on, but you didn't necessarily disturb what they were doing. This quality of a kind of openness, but a slight enclosure was very helpful in people being able to communicate with each other and respect what other people are doing rather than compete with each other. So we were really happy about people were really enjoying this, and it somehow the spirit of the school was really alive. But then they decided to sell the building, and after a certain process of discussion with friends in Belgium, it was decided that we could reuse some of the elements of the plywood walls in this factory building in Brussels. It was by chance that this happened through an architect friend and this guy Cedric Liebert, who is the director of the architecture center in Brussels called CIVA. He had seen the cast and he liked it very much, and they were taking this factory building, which was a Citroen car factory formerly in the center of Brussels, next to the canal, and they are making it now into an art museum. They're into what they call the Canal Centre Pompidou. So the idea is that they're taking the collection of the Pompidou Center in Paris and using it for 10 years, art from the collection in Paris, and they're going to renovate this factory into an art museum and architecture center. And when we visited, for example, in this picture, it was in its state of like when it had just, the Citroen company had just moved out and they just moved down the canal a bit, and they and there was an architectural competition on for the renovation. And Cedric was thinking that he wanted the boulevard somewhere in this building to be used in the raw factory building to let the public come in during the time when the design is being done for the renovation for 1 year, and that the building was used for 1 year with art in it, as like in the raw, with just a few small interventions, like I'll show you. And for example, they had needed to put a few fire escapes, a few toilets, and so on. But generally, they just installed an art exhibition in this factory, like as you can see here, and this is what it looked like. It had floor markings for the cars and these big high spaces, and it's quite amazing. And this is what it looked like when they opened it for what they called Canal Brut. That means like the kind of raw canal. So here's the plywood walls installed into the ground floor of the building where you enter. Here's a work of Jean Tinguely, the French sculptor from the 20th century, here on this kind of main street-like space that crosses the building. And here is the boulevard, or kind of a reconfigured boulevard, just back in behind here, within the building. That was, this is like it under construction. We took it apart in London. The subcontractor who built it, deconstructed it, put it on a truck and sent it to Brussels. And a group of 25 students from different schools in Belgium and France spent 2 weeks and rebuilt it together with a carpenter. And we had the idea that, the difficulty here is that this is the height of the wall, and this space is much higher than the London building. So the wall was being supported from the ceiling and the floor in London. But here it would fall over. There was no support from the top. So we had to come with some kind of idea about how to support the wall from falling over, where there's no corners. And we thought that there could be a new layer of construction, which would be some cement block walls. And we had this idea when our colleagues from Belgium came to visit us in London, and there was an exhibition in the Whitechapel Art Gallery of Thomas Ruff, the photographer. And this is a photograph, well, a kind of altered photograph of his, of an installation in the Whitechapel Gallery in the 1950s of Jackson Pollock exhibition, where and Ruff has made kind of colored the black and white photograph, the archive photograph. But what was interesting for us was that in this exhibition, they had these concrete block walls installed into the gallery, and the paintings on these concrete walls and on the gallery walls. And the concrete walls were kind of raw cement block with a kind of a light white kind of wash over them. And the joints of the mortar is flush with the block. And we thought, well, maybe we could use something like this, we could make masonry walls in relation to the plywood walls to make the spaces of the rooms behind the walls a little bit. And so that's what we did. We made these pieces of wall that made that's behind at the back of the wall, that like in the where the room studios used to be, that are giving a varied kind of space behind the facade of the wall. So it's like this. This is the that big high space. You come in the door here from the canal side, and this is that big high space, and this is the space of the boulevard. And after some different arrangement of plans, this is the final plan, where this is the long plywood wall, steps like this. And this is one of the meeting rooms. And this is a kind of reconfigured other meeting room, a more open in this end. And this is another series of meeting rooms from the another floor of the London building that is on the other side of this big street, and it's a kind of shop for designer shop. And but these are the concrete pieces that are, it's like an archaeology of some kind of buildings that were there before the plywood walls. It gives the impression of. And here is a big cement platform I'll show you in a picture, and a back wall, and it's like a little theater that makes, and these are two walls that make a space at the end here, like a little performance space. This was used here for a number of there's a screen wall here that's made of corrugated sheet metal that was existing, and this, we retained this, and behind it there's a ramp coming down from the mezzanine level, and behind this screen wall and in some places in front, they made kiosks for food and drink. So this became like a little restaurant alley, and here there was like a wine bar here, and so this was like a little street where you could come and sit at tables here and a varied possibility for eating and drinking. And so here's a sketch of one of these walls, these block walls, and that has a little bench on one side of it. And this is the section through the plywood wall, and this is the theater in elevation. Here's this plan of the plywood wall. Here's another one. The relationship of the plywood wall and this like little niche of the bench. And this is one of the lamps that came from London that was on the ceiling. So they look something like this. I think it was, and then the way that they inhabited it was absolutely wonderful. With they just kind of made it a very homely, and every time I went, it was changing, and became more and more kind of inhabited, and people were using it. It was free to come in, so you could just come and work on your laptop if you wanted. And these walls were intentionally incomplete, like a kind of window openings that looked like the remains of a former building. So there's Florian, and there's this, like that's that one that I just showed you the drawings of. So you can see, you're looking through, and these were not, each one was different from each other one. And there's the theater. Florian called it the Appia Theater. Adolphe Appia was a set designer, and he would use these kind of tectonic elements like steps and so on in this way. They said that they used these for performances and music performances and lectures during this the year that this was hit there. That's a view of this. The boulevard is practically the same configuration as it was in London, but the meeting room was turned 90 degrees, and so a few things were adjusted. But generally, this space was similar. I think it's even better than in London because the height of the ceiling is more generous, and I don't know, the spirit of it in Brussels, I think, was even more enjoyable, and the street lines, like in London, were adding to it. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really joyful to listen. Because I haven't seen all of these fittings in the Belgium building. It looks wonderful. Is it still there? Did you just say? I mean,
Well, so now, so actually, the end of that story is that so that was just for 1 year. They called it the Canal Brut, or the prefigurative year, they called it, and they had some very, very, very good exhibitions. They made 3 different installations. It was fantastic, and then there was there was this architectural competition at the time when we were building this, and it was very well run competition, and it was won by a group of architects that are like 3 teams, a Belgian team, a London team, and a Swiss team, and it was won by Surgis and Bates and EM2N from Zurich and Noah Architekten from Brussels. So that's quite interesting. They're a kind of collaborative team that won it, and they won it because they made a proposal, very, very interesting proposal that doesn't that respects very much the existing building and the architecture that they're putting in, which they have to put in, museum rooms that are climate controlled and everything. It's quite difficult. The way they do it is the architecture is almost invisible, or it's the existing building is more present than the architecture. It's very, very interesting what they're doing. Now and then during this year when this was on, they were developing the competition design that they had won. And now at the end of this year, which was like last June, they demolished this, or they took these walls down, and they're starting the construction now of the renovation. And these walls, I'm not sure, but the idea is that they've put them into storage, and they're going to again rebuild them into the probably into the architecture center.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, so we're not sure yet exactly how, and I think they're going to be needing my support for how to do it, but it could either be within a kind of offices where they for the staff, or it could be within kind of library that they're going to have. They have a large collection of architectural drawings and models of Belgian architecture in the architecture center, and so there'll be an art museum for the Centre Pompidou collection and an architecture center within this cultural center of the canal. We'll see whether it has a third life, but I suppose.
I mean, the extension of life is like ongoing. You never know when it's gonna die, but it's going forever. Yeah. And can you envisage those between the fins of the plywood? As you said, they could become the part of the library. All those fins could work as a bookshelf.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm not showing you, but on the other side, there's these shops, and that's where some of those cabinets are. And we have so there are some places here where actually there's cabinets where you could put your coats and so on. Yeah. they're deeper fins than these ones. But yeah, of course. And when that was used in the architecture school, people were putting their models and things and kind of stuff in there, and it's wide enough that you can actually stand inside here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's like a vertical coffin.
It's yeah, it was. And then here, this is like, that is dropping down because that's where, like, there used to be a beam in London, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's that's not just there for no reason. It's it's where in the former building there was a beam.
Beautiful. It really does contain the time, and this building is traveling around the world now doing the time witness.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Philip.
Does anybody want to ask anything or
any questions or comments? Okay, everyone's shy today.
But I did see some questions that sent to me this morning. And I think I'll try to answer them maybe by email.
By text.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care. And we look forward to have you back again sometime soon.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.